A radical abortion group declaring open season on pro-lifers after a series of attacks across the country. At least 13 pro-life centers have been targets of arson or vandalism. And the group is promising more terror could be on the way, saying in a letter, quote, "It's open season, and we know where your operations are. Everyone with the urge to paint, to burn, to cut, to jam. Now is the time. Go forth and manifest the things you wish to see." Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked to condemn the new threat of violence today, but she said this instead.
A woman has a right to choose, to live up to her responsibility. It's up to her, her doctor, her family, her husband, her significant other, and her God. This talk of politicizing all of this, I think, is something uniquely American and not right.
And after a man was indicted for trying to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, President Biden has still yet to sign a bill giving security to members of the High Court. They say it's technical and whatever. Well, it should get signed, but it should get signed right away because the protesters are still out there. In the first block, Jesse, we talked about Gascon not following through with the enforcement of the law. And Merrick Garland is the Attorney General of the United States. One, he's not arrested one person who is breaking the law, who's protesting outside a justice's home. They're 15 minutes away. It wouldn't be hard to do. And they haven't said anything about this. But if it was abortion clinics, do you imagine that it would be different?
What you don't understand, Dana, is that left-wing violence is just an idea. Remember Antifa? Yes. Just an idea. Right-wing violence, greatest threat to national security ever. Left-wing violence, just an idea. And where's the FBI? I mean, someone sneezes at a militia group and like 15 FBI members take off their jackets with FBI and then arrest everybody. Have they infiltrated Jane's Addiction? Are they entrapping any of these radical activists? Absolutely not. There's not even a suspect. There hasn't even been a single arrest. Whatever happened to silence is violence? Remember, you have to condemn white supremacy if you don't, you're complicit. They've asked Joe. They've asked Nancy. Remember how many times they asked Donald Trump to condemn racism? Mm-hmm. We did it like 50. He's like, who do you want me to condemn? What do you want me to do it? She got a meatball down the middle of the plate, and she pivoted and didn't condemn. So she's giving license to this stuff. And where is the leak investigation? How hard is that? You round up the clerks and you waterboard them.
Jesse.
You take their phones and you waterboard them. Theoretically, you waterboard their brains with tough questions. Everybody knows I'm kidding. This is what's going to happen. Next week, the Supreme Court's going to release this opinion, and they're probably going to be gone by then. They'll probably be in their houses in Maine on the coast or at some lake house in Minnesota, because once this comes down, there is going to be action.
Judge, when you hear Nancy Pelosi pivot away and just say, but a woman has a right to choose, I mean, in some ways, it's like, well, okay, the ruling would send the decisions back to the states where the states could decide. So you could have the legislative fight there. Yeah. Or you could have violence at all of these places.
Well, they don't truly believe in democracy, because true democracy is if the issue of choice, abortion, whatever you want to call it, is delivered to each state where everybody gets to vote. So they don't believe in true democracy, although every day they're out there fighting because everything we do is a threat to democracy. But pivoting in answer to the question, a woman has the right to choose, is like Jen Psaki saying the president thinks people have a right to protest. This is what I was talking about in the last block. This is, if you step back and look at it, this is a government that picks and chooses what laws they want to enforce and what laws they want to ignore. And as a result of that, we've got an attempted murder of a United States Supreme Court justice. We've got all kinds of people violating Title 18, 1507, not being arrested. We finally get a law passed that's on Biden's desk to protect the Supreme Court justices. And the reason that 22 out of 27 Democrats wouldn't sign the bill, it simply calls for protecting Supreme Court justices, is they didn't move fast enough on gun control, so we don't care about their lives. And all 22 of the 27 of them, they asked for extra security for themselves, as if they're more important than a Supreme Court justice who's there for life. The Democrats are the party of chaos, anarchy, violence, and intolerance.
They also said that they wanted federal judges also to get that protection. The Republicans said, okay, so let's write another bill. We can talk about that. They're not against that. Harold, what is going on at the Justice Department of the United States?
Probably a lot, and I agree with everything that's been said. I disagree. This is not a Democrat issue, but I do. Democrats are not Well, let me just finish my point. Republicans and Democrats, we have a virus of extremism in the country. And that extremism manifests itself with everyone believing that violence is okay if it's in pursuit of a goal that you want. It has manifested itself in this cancel culture conversation. We all like language that we like, but if it's language we don't like, we want to cancel it. And it goes on both sides of the aisle in that regard. Judge, you're right. Most governments and whomever's elected as president, they prioritize the laws that they want to not enforce, but what they're going to go about really pursuing. And we can all have disagreements about that. The one thing about when governments do that, or a governor or a president or mayor does it, is we can unelect them. I think every Democrat, and I've said this, any Democrat that does not condemn this violence, does not condemn what's going on outside of justices of the Supreme Court's homes, or in really ways are not fit to be in positions of leadership. Republicans who do the same, who don't condemn violence when it's against, whether it's Republican or Democrat, we're undermining our democracy when we don't do this. The thing that happened in Virginia last year in the governor's race, there were a number of people that came out, parents that came out and protested at school board meetings, which I thought was fine. But when you begin to threaten elected officials, I have a real problem with that, and those people should be arrested. The way you change a policy, a public policy, is you unelected people in office. The people of Virginia wouldn't elected the governor that they wanted in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's what we should do.
What about the FBI? Go ahead.
I just believe, look, I think what's happening in the Justice Department, I agree with you, Dana. We sometimes invoke race a little too much here. Now, I don't like the racial stuff.
Nobody's talking about race here.
Well, we talked about racism. We said, well,
we're talking about party. We're talking about the fact that the Democratic Party, with BLM burning down police precincts and neighborhoods in 2020, said nothing until after the Republican National Convention. They waited for months. Nobody said boo, okay? And now we've got the people who are Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden. They're not criticizing the people in front of the Supreme Court justices who should be charged and indicted for Title 18, 1507. We're not talking about race here. We're talking about the law that is being violated, that they are not enforcing because of their political
you guys,
agenda.
I got to get Greg in, because in the first block you talked about the government not holding up its end of the contract, and by the Justice Department not actually enforcing any of these laws. You have to wonder, like, who's going to stand up for the people?
Well, first of all, we have to address the real offensive thing that was said at this table. It's called Jane's Revenge, Jesse, not Jane's Addiction. Great band from the 90s, one of the greatest alt-rock bands.
Did I really say that?
Yes, you did. You did. And it was disgusting. All right, so there is an interesting theme here. If you look at Merrick Garland and you look at Pelosi and then you look at the media coverage of the attempted assassination of Kavanaugh, I have 4 examples. Generally, you only need 3 examples for a trend.
Okay.
But I have 4 examples. 4. This is kind of exciting to me. So one, you have attacks on pro-life offices, right? Then you have the letter that was labeling parents as domestic terrorists. Mm-hmm. Then you have there's no mercy being shown for the January 6 protesters, many of them have never agitated in their lives, right? Okay, that's 3. Number 4, voting not to protect SCOTUS while protecting themselves. So that's 4 examples. They all have something in common. That is, I think the 2 words is open season. It's as though the media should be distributing hunting licenses in bright orange vests to the excited hunters aching to get bag their first concerned parent. All of these people are tangentially or somewhat related to the right, republicanism. So that's kind of what I think that's what we're all getting at here. Is like we're looking at this and we're going, is it open season on anybody? And purely by just connection. So you have some, like when Harold talks about radicals, we do have radicals. They have radicals. But now it's being the broad brush. We're all bad. And so what happens is Merrick Garland ignores it. Pelosi ignores it. The media ignores it. Because they're kind of, it's being implied that it's okay to go hunting. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing people getting hunted in various forms. And you can't deny it if it's not being stopped.
The last thing I would point out is these 13 attacks have been against pregnancy centers. You know what happens at a pregnancy center? Mm-hmm. Where they help a woman who is maybe she's going to be a single mom. Maybe she wants to keep her baby, or maybe she wants to give her baby up for adoption, but she needs the help. They do all sorts of things. They help with counseling. They help with finances, or like helping them get the equipment that they'll need in order to do that. These are the places that are being attacked. So think about that too, Jane.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.